Welcome to Balanced Life with Debbie Carlin Boyle. Conversations connecting to a healthier you. The show that gives you all the latest and greatest health and wellness information to inspire you to live a life of balance and joy. Debbie Carlin Boyle is a health and nutrition coach, personal trainer, and fitness instructor who helps her clients live in balance with everything that feeds us, in addition to the food on our plate. Please welcome your host, Debbie Carlin Boyle.
Hello, good afternoon. Happy Tuesday afternoon to my audience. For most of you, it's middle of the day, later in the day, and even some of you overseas, it's the late evening. So welcome all of you to the show today. You have come to my show, which is Balanced Life with Debbie Carlin Boyle. I am conversations that connect to a healthier you. I interview people that are doing great things in the world of wellness from every aspect. I hit from all angles of everything that feeds us, in addition to the food on our plate, because that's really important to live a balanced life. And for me, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I am a personal trainer, a fitness instructor, a health and fitness coach, and a nutrition coach. And I help people find balance in their life with, again, all the things that need to be connected in order for us to feel well and be well. And sometimes you just need a little bit of push, you need a little bit of motivation, you need a little bit of accountability, and I'm that person for you. So I invite you to go to my website, which is balancedlifebydebbie.com. And it's DEBI. We're going to show that up on the screen. And if you go there, you can find the way to connect with me. And I do an intake of 50 minutes where we just talk about you and we get to know your concerns, your goals, and where you want to end up. And I tell you how we can go about doing that. And you can work with me in groups as well. So if you go to my website, it is all there. I also have this podcast that I do bi-monthly. So I do it the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. And if you go to my YouTube channel and subscribe, it will show you when a new show is up there. So I go live the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, and then it pops up on my YouTube channel where it lives forever. So any subject under the health and wellness umbrella, if you go to Balanced Life by Debbie YouTube, you will find my show there, and you can listen to anything that could help you in the wellness field. I also want to let you know that since we are live, I'm interactive. So you can call in and become part of the conversation. So to do that, write this down if you'd like to make a call or make a comment. To ask a question, the number here is area code 323-524-2599. Again, 323-524-2599. And I have a great guest for you today, and I think it's going to stir up some stories from probably you, the listener. So call in. We'd love to hear from you and hear your experience in the same situations that we're talking about, or any kind of comment that you want to make. We would love to have you join us. So today, like I said, I have a great show for you. And so if you're having trouble crushing your cravings, and you want to love your life and never go on a diet again, then you'll love to hear what my guest and I will be talking about today. Jon is a weight loss coach and an emotional eating expert that helps people with brain-driven weight loss. Jon McLernon helps his clients treat themselves with compassion when they embark on their weight loss journey. Jon himself lost over 100 pounds and healed himself from being a self-loathing food addict and a binge eater. From nanotechnology researcher to Navy Marine engineer to globe-trotting nomad, Coach Jon spent most of his life running from his true calling until one question did change his life. And now he's on a mission to help others lose weight for good and leave BS diets in the rearview mirror. Today, he is passionate about helping others heal their relationship with food, as well as through his Freedom Nutrition Coaching Program, which marries the science of metabolism with the psychology of behavior change and the compassion of human connection to create life-changing transformations with his clients. So to talk all about how this works, will you please welcome my guest, Jon McLernon, to the show today. There you are. Hi, Jon.
Hey, how are you doing? It's awesome to be here.
We applaud. My secret audience in the walls applause for my guest. So welcome.
It's not very often that I get a round of applause when I jump on a show, and so I think this is a real treat.
Yeah, it gets the energy up, right? It gets us going.
Absolutely.
So we have a little cheering section for you. So thank you for joining me today. I'm so glad I found you. We both have we both belong to podcast.com, which kind of illuminates our shows in that we can network with each other, because they put out, if you're looking for me, I look for people that are in the health and wellness field, and you can put yourself out there to say that you would love to be on somebody's show, or you can invite other people onto your show, and that's how I found you. And I love this service because it keeps me from making those phone calls and those kind of things. Everything we can do is sort of internal, and it works out. So I was lucky enough to find you. We had our conversation, and I just love what you're doing. And we're going to get into all of it today. But before we do, we're going to learn a little bit about you and your background and how you got to why you're doing what you're doing. And then we're going to get to the ins and outs of how it all works and why it all works. So tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're born, because I know you're not American. So let's start from the beginning.
Yeah, and it'll be really cool next time around if we can come down and do the show live in the studio in LA.
Yes.
And so I live currently in a city called Red Deer, Alberta. So for American listeners, I'm north of Montana and just on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. But I was actually born out on the west coast, a city called Vancouver, and I was born at 26 weeks. So interestingly, I wasn't actually expected to survive, but here I am. I beat the odds. I'm pretty grateful for that. So I was born at home, and my dad had the presence of mind to open my airway with a syringe, and he performed CPR with his pinky finger, and that helped me to stay alive until the ambulance could get to where we were. And so that was quite an illustrious start to my.
So what's that? So did your mom plan a home birth? I know you were early. No, because you were early.
No.
It was just boom. That was it. You were coming.
Yeah, originally my mom, I believe, she thought she had to go to the bathroom. She wasn't quite sure what was going on. And so luckily she went, uh-oh, no, I think the baby's coming. And my dad said, if you want to make someone break out in a cold sweat, make a husband break out in a cold sweat, just say, uh-oh, I think the baby's coming.
Oh, that's scary. I mean, so my daughter had a home birth, but it was planned. And she actually went over her due date. So we knew, but no matter what, they're always scary. But when they're not planned, they're definitely the scariest. So wow, your parents raw.
Yeah, I really owe a lot. I think like my dad's quick thinking is the reason why I didn't suffer from any brain damage, actually.
Yes.
Because that period of time with oxygen deprivation, there wasn't really a labor. Apparently I just popped out like 2 seconds sort of thing. Like,
wow.
And I was 2 pounds 9 ounces, and I went down to about 2 pounds 1 ounce. So this is going back to 1982. And so that's that was pretty early for that time. I believe nowadays we are advanced enough that babies may even be able to have a good chance of survival born at like 22 weeks. But back then 26 weeks was extremely early. And so I spent the first 9 weeks of my life in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit in Vancouver. And there I was a pretty tiny little fella.
Yeah,
so I
you
could fit
can
into the
tell.
palm of my dad's hand. And so I try to remember that story and just be grateful that I'm here, because I've heard the story, and I think for many years I kind of took it for granted. But just now that I'm a father as well, I have a different appreciation for kind of the magnitude of what took place.
Oh, I bet. Wow. And being that premature, you're right, that you could have some health issues down the line Is your dad in the medical field at all? Did he have any experience to know what to do?
He grew up his teen years in Australia, and so he was trained as a surf lifesaver
Ah,
in Queensland, in Australia there. And so he would have had he had some sort of basic medical knowledge, and he said kind of just instinct took over. It was like, he said I was blue, my eyes were shut, my ears were folded over, and, it took a minute to sort of separate me from the placenta because we were about the same size, but he just started doing CPR with his pinky finger on this tiny little human. And because of that, he kept me going till the ambulance could get me there and bring me to the hospital.
wow. Well, that's a real that's a real backstory for you. So from there, how was your childhood? So you had no health issues from being premature like that.
The only things that I think that really showed up were I'm a little bit slower to learn how to do coordinated physical activities. I can't dance to save my life, so I don't have great coordination with my hands and my feet, but I can hide that fairly well. I think one of the things that showed up was I was pretty fiercely independent from an early age, and we could probably connect that to the fact that the first couple of months of my life, I was lying on my back in an incubator when normally a baby would be enjoying skin-to-skin contact with their mother. But my mom had a 1-year-old at home, because I was kind of unplanned in every sense of the word. I joke that I was a failure of 1980s contraception. They were kind of hoping for a daughter, and they were kind of hoping that they'd have about 2 years between kids and so on. And so in every sense of the word, I kind of was an accident, but they call me their miracle baby, and I couldn't have asked for better parents.
Yeah.
They're amazing. They're still alive, thankfully. They're still with us, and they're now really wonderful grandparents.
Oh, I bet. There's nothing better. I'm here to tell you. It's my life lit up almost 1 year ago. November 4th will be 1 year. It lit up when my granddaughter came into the world, and every day is magical with her. So I feel for you and your parents that they get that opportunity to be grandparents, because really there's so many wonderful things about parenting and being a parent, and my kids are, my gems. But really the best thing about being a parent is being a grandparent at this point in my life. So I just, it's great.
I hear the great part is you can hand them back.
Yes, you can. You're just not there 24/7 dealing with all the little itty bitty things that, How old is, you have a son, right?
Yeah, he's 7 months old.
Oh, he's a baby.
Oh, he is. He is the cutest little boy in the world, tell you what. And not
bet.
that I'm biased or anything, of course.
No, how can we be?
Yeah. But, I try to get on as many diaper changes as I can. We kind of joke that my wife handles the input and I handle the output.
Gotcha.
So, but that's my opportunity to get face-to-face time with him, and sort of connect to him in close quarters, whereas mom, and she does change some diapers. Obviously, I can't always be there every time, but I do it as often as I can. And I'm really fortunate in that I work from home. And so that gives me the opportunity to have some degree of flexibility in my hours and make sure that I'm getting some really quality time with him. And so, and I think it's really important because I want to model healthy masculine behavior for him, because I think that's really important for him, because I look back kind of over my own struggles, which we might dive a bit into with mental health, and my struggles with my masculine identity and things like that. And I think I'm just in a really, really good, healthy place to be a father. And so I think the timing is absolutely brilliant.
It's great. It's great because it's so important what you role model for him. So to be in a good place when you have a child is really important. But let's get into your childhood. So the reasons why it's so important, because what was your childhood like?
I think I was one of only 3 of my friends where both of our parents were still together. So I think that really laid the groundwork for understanding what a healthy marriage and relationship looks like. So again, I feel like I was very, very fortunate in that regard. And that's not meant to be a critique of anyone whose marriage hasn't stayed together, but I think I recognize I'm really, really fortunate because of that. My brother just being a year older than me, it meant that I was extremely competitive in trying to keep up with him and do everything that he did. And that probably actually helped my development. I got into sports. I was quite a competitive basketball player, and my brother actually became probably one of my biggest fans. I grew taller than him and bigger than him, and so he cheered me on and he coached me. And so we ended up moving to a small town. We left Vancouver because my parents thought they wanted me to spend my teen years growing up in a small town. because I thought it kind of just help us to be better human beings. And there is something about growing up in a small town that's pretty neat. Although I will say, without divulging too many details, I'm glad that my youth and my teen years were spent before Facebook was a thing, because we certainly got ourselves into trouble as teens usually do in small towns.
Same here. My hand goes up for that. Yeah. I was glad social media wasn't around when I was growing up. It was the best, probably. So with that, you sound like you were active as a child. What was your relationship with food like, I guess is where I'm leading to, when you were younger, that you became so overweight?
Well, I think I could trace it back. One of the things is, my father was an entrepreneur as well in a couple of different times. And along the way, there was a few business setbacks, meaning that there were quite a number of years where money was actually really tight. And once again, just tremendous credit to my parents for navigating this and helping us navigate it with grace, really. But there was times where we didn't have a lot. And so because of that, it was whenever I was sort of presented with like a good meal, a meal that was a treat, like it was genuinely a treat. And I would eat it like it was my last meal. And so we could probably tie a little bit of it to that growing up, just not having a lot growing up. And the one, I say the one thing that we were never short of in our household was love, and that was really important. But also for my teen years, my grandmother actually lived with us in a basement suite, and she was a wonderful cook. She could just make just about anything taste good. And it was really special for me to be able to go downstairs to her suite and maybe sit down and have a bowl of cereal with her, eat some her famous ginger snap cookies and with milk and things like that. And so,
you equated food with love in a sense. I had that same issue growing up. That's how I spent weekends at my grandmother's, so hours and just years of my life at my grandmother's house on the weekends. And she cooked for me. That's what she did. And, and she wanted to buy me Twinkies and Ho-Hos and Ding Dongs and things that she equated to, this is me giving you love. And so, and that's a hard challenge, I think, that we have, that I go through with my clients, understanding their relationship to food and realizing that those things that harm us isn't because somebody was doing it maliciously. It was doing it out of love. But now we have to just change the dialogue, and the directory of how we look at food and take in food. What we're putting into our bodies affect us, can be very adverse. And we have to understand that. So it's a hard thing to separate, because you equate that, talking about grandmothers. I get it,
There's real positive emotional connections there. And I think that's what makes it a real challenge is we feel as though perhaps we're rejecting someone's love when, and so I try to remember this when somebody out of kindness offers me, a really tasty treat or something indulgent, and, I'm not really feeling like consuming it because I am thoughtful about what I consume nowadays. And so I really try to make a point of expressing, like, thank you for thinking of me. I really appreciate that that you want to offer this for me. And, just right now I'm not hungry, but you know what, maybe we could just put it aside and think about it for later. So really kind of being gracious about it, because I think it's the gesture that they're putting forward that matters more than whether or not I consume what they're offering. And so I really want to make sure that I show grace when somebody does offer that and decline in a way that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that's something that you can do now, knowing what you know. But back then, as a little boy, you didn't know that food could harm you, and you didn't really probably understand until you hit a certain point that food and weight were equated. That they had a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, because I was active. I was a very active kid, and so because we didn't actually have a TV growing up, so we spent a lot of time playing outside, and just we didn't have the internet. I think I got my first Game Boy when I was maybe 12 or 13 years old, and so being active was just a part of my life, and that spilled over in sort of my teen years, and even when I started going to university, and so. I had the benefit of being a large, fairly muscular male youth growing up, which that helps in terms of burning calories and a high level of activity, that I could sort of, could we say, hide my eating habits in a sense, or like it took quite a while before my eating habits actually caught up with me. And so, but when they did, man, they caught up pretty hard.
So, so then comes the realization. So then, how did you feel in your own body? How did you feel? At what age were you at this point? Because I guess that matters. Because I know when I gained weight at puberty, that affected everything. About the way I felt about myself.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't until after I went through a traumatic incident when I was 29 years old, living in South Africa, and the result of that incident was, I think all of the groundwork that had been laid in terms of my relationship with food really got laid bare, and I turned to food as a source of comfort and a source of escape and a way of kind of trying to navigate the trauma, because I didn't really know how to deal with the fallout from that experience. And so that's what led me to falling into this pattern of behavior where I was a binge eating food addict. And
what was that experience? So do you want to talk about it, or is it hard for you?
No,
I mean, in a nutshell,
in a nutshell, and I will say to people, if it sounds like I talk about it in a fairly lighthearted fashion, it's not to downplay the severity of the experience, but rather that I have done the work through the trauma counseling and with professionals that's helped me to get to the place where I can speak about it, actually even from a place of gratitude. And I wouldn't remove this experience from my past. But we were living down in South Africa. We were teaching on a nature reserve, working with underprivileged youth. And one night I was jumped by 4 men who'd broken into the reserve for some reason, and they nearly beat me to death. And so that in itself was just a really sort of shocking experience, because I grew up in small town Canada where we had fist fights and this and that, but like that degree of sort of malevolent violence had, we heard about it, but to be exposed to it in that way, I just really wasn't equipped to deal with it. And we continued living in South Africa for another 4 or 5 months, and there was there's more incidents that happened down there, but it's such a beautiful country, but it's racked with sort of violence, and it's a really, really difficult place to live. And so for us, food was a way of just trying to escape all of the difficult emotions that we dealt with, because my wife was traumatized in a different way, having sort of seen me after what had happened. And so both of us really were traumatized by that, and my way of dealing with it was to eat food because it's more socially acceptable than drugs or alcohol, frankly.
True. Absolutely true. And and it's easier to just, processed food, fast foods all around. It's just easier to because you say that you were binge eating. So basically, was it that was the emotionally you were filling a hole that needed to be, that food obviously doesn't fill. And then
that's the downside, right? Is because no matter how much I ate, it could never seem to fill what it was that I was trying to fill. It could never fully address. It only gave me like a temporary escape in the moments while I was eating. The moment the binge was done was when, like I say, the 3 Amigos showed up: shame, guilt, and regret.
Yes.
It was a really, that was where it became really, really uncomfortable. And I think one of the hardest parts of a behavior like this is it doesn't logically make sense. And there was a part of my brain that would go like, this is hurting you. But there was a compulsion behind it that would seem to be much more powerful than the little quiet voice that said, you probably shouldn't do this is hurting you.
And it's so hard to change. I want to hear, we're going to take a quick break. I have, believe it or not, we're halfway through the show. So what I want to do is take a quick break from one of my sponsors, and then we're going to come back, and I want to see the turning point. What was it that really said, there's something bigger here than the food isn't doing it for me? So we'll come right back right after this break and hear what that change was and how you help your clients with what helped you. We'll be right back. I have been a wine enthusiast for many decades, but for a while I had to stop drinking wine because of the sleepless nights and the headaches that I would have in the morning, even after only 1 glass. Does this sound familiar? So for the past 5 years, and since the start of my show, I've been looking for a healthy wine, and finally I found the answer I've been looking for: Dry Farm wines. Dry Farm wines are lab tested for purity, just 12.5% alcohol or less, 0.15 grams of sugar or less per glass. very low sulfites, and free of toxic additives. Dry farm wines are dry farmed with healthy, biodiverse soil, and the taste, bright and vibrant due to no manipulation. I can't say enough about the amazing wines that I've tried. And now you too can drink wine and not worry about how it is negatively affecting your health. Just go to dryfarmwines.com/balanced life by Debbie so you too can taste the love put into every bottle. Hi, welcome back. If you're going to drink wine, this is the way you want to do it. So look that up. That's also on my website, so how you can click a link and find out more about that. Anyway, what happened? What was the turning point for you that you just said? At some point, you ballooned up to over 100 pounds overweight, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, and I will say, like, I struggled for 6 or 7 years with my weight, serial yo-yo dieter. I think the variety of diets that I tried spanned from being a raw food vegan all the way to almost being a carnivore. But none of the things were really addressing the real issues that needed to be taken care of. And so it was when I hired a coach about a little over 4 years ago, and he worked with me in a different way that I didn't expect. I think one of the biggest struggles was I didn't really know the kind of help that I needed. So I was turning to sort of diets and weight loss plans and exercise plans, thinking that the problem was the extra weight I was carrying, when in fact that was really the symptom. It was the symptom of this disordered relationship I had with my body, with food, with myself. And he really shone a light on that with the work that he did. And, I say he asked me a question that really changed my life. And that was, he said, Jonathan, if you make a list of all the things you love and value, how far down that list do I go before I see your name? That question really stopped me because, truthfully, in that moment, it wasn't even that I was at the bottom of the list. I wasn't even on the list. And so he really opened my eyes to an entirely different perspective. Like, I had to change my relationship with myself, but I didn't even know how to do that. How do I start learning about what self-love and self-compassion looks like when really it wasn't something I thought about for most of my life? In fact, for my entire life, I'd never thought about it.
And that in itself will make you feel not good enough because you're not taking the time to nurture you. And you take time in your job or in your personal relationships, but not for you. And emotionally, if you don't deal with what's going on and you don't find ways to find self-love, then they play out in some way. And in this way, it was you overeating for you. So you went on a program, and how long did it take you to lose, and what changed in your life from that? And then we'll go on to what you're now doing for people.
Yeah, so I think it was really about 12 months that I worked with this coach. And in the time that we worked together, I lost about 60 pounds. And so I'd already, I'd already lost 40 pounds of the weight, but then from that point onwards, it sort of just been back and forth and up and down. And I couldn't seem to break through getting healthy. And so it really was this addressing my relationship with myself. And it's going to sound crazy, but it started with something really simple, and that was brushing my teeth every morning. What that was an act of self-care, a daily act of self-care. And whenever we take, let's say I held this belief about myself that I wasn't even worthy of self-love or self-care. And the way to change that belief was to chip away at it little by little with small acts of self-care. It went from, brushing my teeth in the morning to now I would drink, 500 mils or, I'm not sure how many ounces that is. Is that a pint maybe?
I don't know. I can't convert. I'm not sure.
500 mils of water every morning. I think that's 16 ounces of water every morning.
Okay, every morning.
So I would
Good.
hydrate.
Yep.
And then I
First
added another
small
piece.
action step. That's a good one.
And so it was these small acts of self-care that I started showing myself to really start to change this belief that I'm not worthy. And, because one of the other struggles was that I'd already been in business with a couple of businesses before, and I had a tendency to be a workaholic, and it was like take care of the business before myself. But that's not a sustainable way to be in business. And so I realized that I had to be investing in myself first, especially with the business that I was in. If ever I was truly going to be able to help other people, I couldn't keep putting myself on the back burner. So really had to change that belief.
Yes, absolutely. And so, was it a health coach you worked with? I'm just curious, or
Yeah, well,
a
he
life
was
coach,
a nutritionist.
a
Yeah,
nutritionist.
but
Okay.
they with a focus on behavioral psychology.
Oh, great. Which is why it's so important to you that you help your clients that way. So, So now you have such a passion about helping others. What makes you so passionate about working with other people, and how is that playing out?
Well, I think it's I know now how it feels to struggle.
Hmm.
I know what it feels like to be obese. I know what it feels like to try to get help and it feels like people don't understand you. So, I it's not something you can read about in a book. This is something that is a lived experience, and having that level of understanding means that I can connect with people on an entirely different level. And so, I kind of coin what I do, brain-driven weight loss. I think you mentioned that term in the beginning,
Yes.
and the idea behind this is the brain is actually the organ that's driving our behaviors. It's the reason we make the choices that we do. And so many efforts to create change take this outside in approach. I'm going to impose these rules on you because something is wrong with you. When in fact, really, even a behavior like binge eating was a behavior that made sense if you understand how the brain works. It doesn't mean it was a helpful or a healthy behavior, but it was a behavior that could be understood if we knew how the brain worked. And so when we factor in our internal environment, our emotions, our mindset, our psychology, our habits, these are the things that most powerfully influence the choices we make and ultimately our results. And so when we address things like our sense of identity, when we recognize that we will act in congruence with who we see ourselves to be. For me, when I was a jolly fat guy, my brain would sort of compel me to act in a way that the jolly fat guy would act because that was my identity. And so if we want to create permanent change, like permanent weight loss, we have to create permanent change. And we only do that through really establishing a new pattern of behaviors, a new sense of identity. And it's possible because our brain has this wonderful property called neuroplasticity, which is the
Mm-hmm.
brain's ability to rewire itself.
Absolutely. That's very true. As a health coach, we know that, and we try to help people understand that, because some people always they feel, I'm a lost cause and it's
Yeah.
too late. It's never too late, no matter what age or where you're at, what your weight is, what what's setting you back. It is never too late. And you can start, you can make small, sustainable changes that turn in to permanent habits that are good ones, because you created the bad ones. You weren't
Yeah.
born with these habits. They came up situationally throughout your life from what you saw or what you absorbed as a child. Those can also be redone at any
Yeah.
point in your life. Your
Yeah.
cells can rebuild
Yeah.
from bad cells to good cells, to keep it
Yeah.
that simple, based
Yeah.
on what you put in your body and how you nurture yourself and take care of yourself,
With
and
that wonderful field of epigenetics, which is kind of like turning on and off certain switches in your body. Our body responds to the instructions we give it, which is really neat. It's not that there's an instantaneous change, but over time, as we create these changes, they've even taken folks in their 90s in nursing homes and got them onto like weightlifting regimens, and they've
mm-hmm.
seen significant improvements in bone density and muscular strength. And well, of course, they're not necessarily going to be like they were when they were 30 years old, but the thing is you're right when you say like it's never too late to start creating some kind of positive change in your life because these steps will improve your quality of life. There's no two ways about it.
And what are these steps? I know that you have your Crush Your Cravings giveaway book, which I actually downloaded and took a peek at, and you have this way of I think it's the word, I forget what the word is, but each one is assigned a different thing that helps you to crush your cravings, that can
Oh yeah,
change your
yeah.
bad habits into good ones. What
The
How does it work for you? I know what worked for you. How do you work with your clients and your groups?
Yeah, well, I say when I work with somebody, our goal is we're going to reverse engineer your healthy lifestyle. So the way that kind of a traditional diet type approach works is it's like we're going to impose these rules on you, all these rules starting today, and you're going to have to try and follow them. Well, that approach has been proven to fail repeatedly to the point where we just think that well, we know that dieting doesn't work, and there's a whole sort of anti-diet culture that exists out there. And so rather than trying to force people into a metaphorical straitjacket and trying to unnaturally force the body to lose weight, I think what we need to do is we work with each individual like two experts collaborating towards a common goal. So I treat the client like they're the expert of their own life experience, and I'm the expert in nutrition and psychology. And so we want to not only talk about the science of metabolism, because that matters, of course, but we want to talk about the psychology of behavior change and creating awareness around that, and ultimately the compassion of human connection. It's so important that people understand that your struggles are never going to be used, or should never be used, as ammunition against you to try and coerce you into creating change.
So how do you mean? I think I understand what you're saying, but how do you mean? What do you mean by that? Your struggle shouldn't be used as ammunition against you. How
Well, think
so?
about it this way. Like, so, for example, when I hired a coach, and it really didn't work that well, he was what we would call a macro coach. And so he was assigning macronutrient ratios for me to try and follow. You know, eat a certain number of grams of protein every day, eat a certain number of grams of carbohydrates every day, and so on, and eat a certain number of calories every day. So there's these rules that we try to fit into. And when I would break down and I would binge and I wouldn't stick to the rules and I wouldn't stick to my calories, or I wouldn't stick to my macros, or whatever we're trying to fit into, you know, he'd just say to me, like, you know better than this. Why are you doing this? You know, and there was no real attempt to understand why the behavior was taking place. And so it was more like there was this kind of coercion or shame or kind of like guilting, trying to make me feel bad to get me to change. But ultimately, that's a terrible tactic for creating long-term transformation.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Okay. Got that. So what did work? What does work?
Well, I say surprisingly, because it surprised me, because I used to be very, really quite abusive towards myself. So this idea that self-compassion. Now, I think it's important we clarify that self-compassion is not the same thing as self-enabling. In other words, if we say, well, I've had a hard day, I'm already halfway through this bottle of wine, I might as well polish the whole thing off. That's not really compassion. That's what we call enabling. But rather, when we seek to understand, well, why is it that you're halfway down a bottle of wine all by yourself, alone and upset? What are you wanting this wine to do for you? And so we look to use compassion to understand the behavior, not to enable unhelpful behaviors, but to understand, if we know why this behavior is happening, now with our awareness, we can start to come up with different ways of navigating these difficult emotions that we might be feeling.
So basically, you change the dialogue. You choose to change the dialogue. You go to the why am I eating this, or why am I drinking this alcohol, or why am I doing this bad behavior that I know is bad for me, is sabotaging what I'm trying to achieve. But so intellectually, we kind of know that, but there's almost a rote thing that just kind of takes over, and before you know it, the glass of wine is in your hand, the chocolate cake is in your hand, and you know, you take one bite, and of course sugar, which alcohol is, and so is cake, and you know, is very addictive. So to crave more before. How do you stop and address your why and make it permanent? How do you do that?
So this is why I say compassionate awareness is the first step to change.
Okay.
So as you described, many of our behaviors take place at the subconscious or even unconscious level. We do it without really consciously thinking about it. So if we were to put, you know, that spray that they use on CSI and shine UV light on it and try and track your footprints throughout your house, we would see there's probably a predictable pattern of movement towards your fridge or your pantry or your cupboards or things like that where your snack foods are kept. And you would see that there's a well-worn path that's done basically on autopilot. Well, we need to start bringing those behaviors to our conscious awareness, because only in our conscious awareness can we create change. Now, the reason I use the word compassion is because if we become aware of our unhelpful behaviors, for example, if I was binge eating a pizza, the awareness by itself without compassion could mean that I start beating myself up and berating myself instead of trying to understand. But compassion is let's help you understand why you do this. It's not about being a bad person. It's about your brain trying to meet a certain need. And so, you know, you mentioned the Crush Your Cravings guide, for example, and we'll break down in a bit more detail for those who read the ebook, but really I have a method that I call FAST, F-A-S-T.
That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
you break down because you describe something under each one of those letters. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. Yeah, so feel is the first one. So really, what is it you're feeling? Where are you feeling in your body? Where, acknowledge. So just because a negative emotion is present doesn't mean that there's something inherently wrong with you, because life does involve negative emotions. Without sadness, there is no happiness. And so I think we make this mistake that the moment a negative emotion appears, we feel as though we have to immediately try to annihilate it and erase it and sort of force happiness or force a feeling of bliss, which turns us to, eating junk foods that give us a bit of a dopamine hit, that pleasure chemical in our brain. So feel, acknowledge, speak is S, and it doesn't necessarily have to be speaking out loud. You could be writing something down on paper, but just put words to what you're feeling, or try to put words to what you're feeling. That's, again, sort of heightening or deepening that awareness. And then T stands for time. And that is the most intense part of emotional wave typically lasts for less than 10 minutes, usually around 7 to 8 minutes. And so if you can put about 10 minutes between yourself and the impulsive decision you want to make, now you're at the point of conscious decision, and the most intense part of the emotion is past. And now you can think a little more carefully, do I want to do this? Does this match up with my goals? Or is this something that would be an unhelpful choice for me to make?
Okay, that I think that is really achievable from an individual standpoint. What I find is the most difficult, and even coaches struggle with things, as we both know, but I find this a little difficult in my life, because this I have to get a little bit more on the conscious end of it, and with my clients is when we're around other people and making sure that other people, like, I have a very healthy lifestyle. Everybody who knows me knows it. And so I have to come to terms with people kind of making fun of me if I won't grab a drink when they do, or I don't grab a chip and I use a vegetable on my guacamole instead, and not everybody around you is on board, because that's not that's not their lifestyle. They're not doing those behaviors. So I find, and I have clients that struggle with this, they get made fun of almost when people see them taking the healthy route and really stepping back to make the conscious decision not to eat that way, or go down that way, or go take those exercise classes, or whatever it may be. If they're not on board with it, your friends and your family, then they're going to give you a hard time. And how do you work with your clients for them to overcome that? Because obviously the people that are surrounding them, if they're extremely overweight and coming to you for weight loss, the people around them are probably struggling with weight issues too. And if they don't change, how do they stay on track?
Yeah, that can be a really difficult thing to navigate. So interestingly, this is also where compassion comes into play. So when somebody makes a snide remark or sort of a joking remark, and they're trying to essentially coerce you into making a bad choice, when you understand where that behavior comes from, it doesn't mean necessarily that it's okay or it's ideal, but it means you can kind of let it go. What it is when we see somebody else bettering themselves, we stop and reflect on our own choices, and we wonder, and we kind of actually see our own unfulfilled potential too. And maybe that's a little bit deeper than the average person might actually think about, because this often happens at an unconscious level. So we're reflecting on our choices, and we go, well, I'd rather just eat the junk food and feel good right now, but I feel guilty about it because, Debbie is making a healthy choice, and I kind of feel like I should make a healthy choice, but I don't want to. And there's like this whole internal battle that takes place. They're really trying to alleviate their own feelings of discomfort at watching you make a healthy choice, or their feelings of powerlessness around, junk food and things like that. And so again, it's not to talk down about another person, but when you're aware of where that behavior comes from, it becomes a little bit easier to kind of just let it slide and not let it get under your skin.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. You're right. You have to give yourself sort of a mental applause, and just say, I'm going to stick with who I am and what I do. But, it will be as easy as just to comment, oh, Debbie's not going to reach for that. Or oh, don't offer it to her because she won't eat that way. Or, you know, you can sing happy birthday, but she won't have any of the cake, you know, and that it's like it singles you out sometimes when you're in larger groups. And yet I'm not going to change my behaviors to satisfy what's lacking with their behaviors, you know. Well, so
and what people will fail to see is that, you know, let's just say somebody just meets you, for example, and maybe some people have known you for quite a while. Well, somebody just meets you and they go like, oh my gosh, like you're so healthy and I'm so far from where you're at. It looks like it's just this impossible journey to get to be as healthy as you are, for example. And so because they feel sort of so overwhelmed and maybe discouraged at the thought of even trying to make that change, it is easier to just say, well, I wonder if I could just, again, we don't maybe verbalize it in such a way, but pull her down to my level. And when I see that she's human, maybe I'll feel a little bit better about my own struggles.
Yeah, so that makes so much sense. And if you've run across this, I take it with clients. Yeah, so it's a hard thing.
Yeah, we just had Canadian Thanksgiving recently.
Oh yeah,
and our Thanksgiving comes about a month before the American one. Ours is the second Monday in October, and you know, so we went and had Thanksgiving with some friends of ours, and there was, you know, pumpkin pie cheesecake served one day, and another day was like this it's an Australian dessert that my wife is an Australian, and it's called a self-saucing pudding, but it's like a cake with like a type of pudding like icing underneath, and both of them are really, really fabulous. I know, but I actually didn't have either of those, and I didn't really make a big deal of it. I just I just said, hey, you know what, I'm full from the meal I've had. Really enjoyed it. It was a great meal, and I don't need that right now. So I think when we become comfortable with this is the life we want to live, like, you know, there's a saying out there that nothing tastes as good as being healthy feels.
Mm-hmm.
And I just realized this isn't necessarily about, I mean, like our health is built one choice at a time. It's not really about me sort of quote unquote missing out. I'm not really missing out on anything. Because I know that, like, within 5 minutes of consuming, let's say, that piece of cake, I'm going to have a sugar rush and a crash, and I'm going to feel irritable and moody. I'm really not going to feel that great after eating it. And so the trade-off isn't really worth it for me. And it's not that I eat like a monk. I eat some pretty tasty food.
Yeah.
But I'm a lot more thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is I do this because I want to be healthy for my son.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be physically active. And I know that within me, I'm a former binge eating food addict. I have to be a little more thoughtful than the average person about how I consume food, because there is the possibility I could go back down that path again. And that would be heartbreaking, especially in light of my son. And so that, you talked about finding your why, and I call it my emotionally compelling reason. When I'm considering, when I have, you know, maybe an urge to eat in a destructive way, because these urges still appear, I kind of weigh that up against, you know, my love for my son and my desire to be physically present in his life. And that is much stronger than my desire to, say, binge eat a pizza, for example. And so if we can find an emotionally compelling reason, because a lot of this is taking place at the emotional realm, not the logical realm. And so that's why it's really important to know, why does this mean something to me?
Yeah.
And when we can tap into that and connect to that, it gives us sort of the fortitude to be willing to be uncomfortable in certain situations.
Right. And I was also thinking about what our body goes through after you eat things, like even a heavy meal, even just the Thanksgiving meal without even the dessert. I mean, not only are you're somewhat full, right? So, but your body has to now process that food, and it has to assimilate it. And, you know, our systems in our body are real important things that need to be fed. And the only way they get fed really is what we put into our bodies and how we take care of ourselves. So we have to, you know, once you educate yourself just a little bit, you understand it's a bigger picture than it just, you know, hitting your taste buds and chewing and being conscious of how you eat and when and what you eat. It's even bigger than that, because it keeps going. It goes on, so we can get our vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that we need. I was also thinking, I mean, my why came super early because my father was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 5 years old. Wow. But he lived to 46. He was 30 when he was diagnosed, but he lived a very unhealthy life, didn't make any changes, and got sicker and sicker, and more things were being operated on, more chemotherapies, less work. Quality of life just went downhill. And I saw that. And my why, as I became this chubby 15 or so pound overweight teenager before I went to college, was that's not the way I'm going to have my family see me when I do start my family. And that's my story, is that's how I got on the health path from at the age of 19. And yes, it's been a roller coaster. There's been hits and miss for several reasons, but basically ultimately got me out of a very stressful producing job and now doing this full time in the last 6 years, because my passion is so overwhelming that I know if like you, when you see it works for you, it's going to work for others, and you want to share what you know and the process and how you can be successful for it to work for others as well. You have something where you say, and we're going to have to wrap up here in a few minutes, but when you talk about non-food and non-exercise factors, what are those that are the most crucial thing in weight loss that are not non-food and non-exercise?
I would say, in a nutshell, sleep and stress.
Yes.
So I like to think about it as we have 3 or 4 batteries, depending on kind of your belief system. We have a physical, a mental, and an emotional battery, as well as maybe a spiritual battery. And so we want to consider all the different things in our life that are draining those batteries versus recharging those batteries. And what is the balance of that? Because stress is a massive killer. Stress is what leads to high blood pressure. It leads to atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, and so on. Stress suppresses our immune function. It means we're more likely to suffer from cardiovascular disease. It means we're more likely to get diabetes because we don't handle sugar as well as we could, and so on. And one of the big factors in mitigating stress is quality of sleep. And we are getting poorer and poorer quality of sleep as time goes on. Mm-hmm. We're sleeping an average of 6.2 hours a night when we need really closer to 8 to 8.5, because we actually need 4 to 5 90-minute sleep cycles per night to properly recharge. And most people aren't getting anything close to that. And that's the sleep cycles, not counting the time in between. And so if we don't manage those 2 pillars as well as nutrition and activity, because nobody in the 21st century passively manages stress. Watching Netflix and zoning out like a zombie is not passively, or is not actively or proactively managing your stress.
Bummer.
I know, it's just actually suppressing it.
Especially during the pandemic, we're all just like, we're like zombies to these streaming services.
And so if it sounds like I'm speaking really passionately, it's because, I used to live with multiple anxiety episodes a day. So really an overcharged nervous system. So, I really understand at the deepest level what it looks like when you're under extreme duress. And so, I had to make some major shifts in how I lived my life. And one of those things was meditation, for example. And I say you don't have to burn incense and hum in a monastery in the Himalayas. Mm-mm. Really, it's just learning how to breathe in a certain way that actually calms your nervous system. So 4, 7, 8 is a very simple breathing rhythm that taps into your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the one that we call rest and digest. So learning how to do something like that. Really prioritizing sleep and being careful about your screen time, practicing good sleep hygiene, dimming the lights at nighttime, getting off the screens 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime, and so on. For a lot of people, it seems like this would be an impossible thing to do, but it really isn't.
No. And again, small steps. Doing it all at once, it's like, changing your food habits all at once. They're not as sustainable. So each night, maybe one thing, add on one thing towards that for your sleep quality.
Even just add it on like once every 2 weeks to try and make one small change. Maybe it's go to bed 15 minutes earlier. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you're going to try and maybe cut off screen time 15 minutes earlier over the course of a couple of weeks, and so on. Don't expect or don't try to force yourself to change, radically overhaul your entire lifestyle overnight, because that will just trigger what I call the emotional brick wall. Your brain's going to resist all that change. You kind of sneak it in under the radar, and the more times you repeat a behavior, the more likely it is to become a habit. And so it's not so important the magnitude or how big the behavior is, but how frequently that behavior is repeated that determines whether or not it will become a successful habit.
Yes, absolutely, indeed. Our time is up, but you have a program that people can work with you. Tell us more about this program, Lifestyle 180, and quickly, because we're really past time right now, but what is it that this program does?
Well, we've really touched on it already, and it's really about reverse engineering your healthy lifestyle. So myself and the client, we're going to work together collaboratively. The client is going to have an active hand. It's not about me dictating rules, but we start with a principle. The client will try to implement that principle, and they'll guide them towards it until it's shaped to suit their lifestyle. Piece by piece, brick by brick, by the end of it, they've built a new healthy lifestyle in a way that no longer feels overwhelming, all with tremendous support from myself and our wonderful community of clients.
Love it. Absolutely love it. How can people get in touch with you? For those people, most people listen and don't watch us. So
so if you go to freedomnutritioncoach.com, and if you wanted a copy of Crush Your Cravings, you go to freedomnutritioncoach.com/book and enter your email address and name, and I'll fire you a copy of Crush Your Cravings. And I think that'll really open your eyes to a different approach to dealing with your struggles around food.
Love it. It's so wonderful. And now I'm going to ask you for final words of wisdom, final thoughts to leave my listeners with today.
You're not broken. You're not broken. You're not broken beyond repair. There might be an uphill battle. It might be a struggle, but it's absolutely worth it. 100 times out of 100, I'd lose all the weight I lost, and I'd go through all the struggles to become who I am today. I've never met a remarkable person who had an easy life, but it's worth it to struggle and become remarkable.
Wow, I didn't even tell you I was asking that, and look at how brilliant of an answer that was. Wow, Jon, thank you so much. We're going to revisit again. We'll have another show together because this was fabulous, and I think you have so much valuable information and enthusiasm, and what an inspiration you are. So I hope you, the audience, were really able to resonate with that, and that if something clicked for you, that you'll go and check Jon out, okay? Thank you so much for joining me today, Jon, and you, my audience, thank you too. And remember to keep going out and having those conversations like the one we had today that connect to a healthier you. Bye, everybody. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye now.